Beta's own eyes opened wide. "Wow," she said. Torrin laughed. "Oh, you enchantress. Go ahead, Beta. That deserves a 5-credit piece. Let him have it." But the clown was forward with a jump. "No, my lady, mistake me not. I spoke for money, not at all, but for bright eyes and sweet face." "Well, thanks," Beta said. Then to Torrin, "You think the sun's in his eyes?" Torrin rose to his feet. "Now, Bud," he said, "suppose you tell me what you want. Stop annoying the lady." The clown fell back a frightened step, his meager body cringing. "Now, sure, I meant no harm. I am a stranger here, and it's been said I am of addled wits, and yet there is something in a face I can read. Behind this lady's fair aspect there is a heart that's kind, that would help me in my trouble, for all I speak so boldly." Beta said, "Let me talk to him, Torrin." She added swiftly and in an undertone, "There's no use being annoyed at his silly way of talking. That's just his dialect. Our speech is probably as strange to him." She said, "What is your trouble? You're not worried about the guard, are you? He won't bother you." "Oh, no, not he. There is another that I flee. A week ago I ran away. Have slept in city streets and hid in city crowds. I've looked in many faces for help. I find it here." An uplifted, powerful voice suddenly bore down upon them. "Now then, you mud-spawned rascal!" It was the beach guard, with a fire-red face and snarling mouth. He pointed with his low-power stun pistol, and his heavy hand fell upon the clown's thin shoulder, so that a whimper was squeezed out of him. Torrin said, "What's he done?" "What's he done? What's he done? Why, that's good," the guard said with relish. "I'll tell you what he's done. He's run away. The word's all over, Calgan." Beta said with a smile, "Where did he escape from, sir?" The guard raised his voice. A crowd was gathering, and as the audience increased, the guard's sense of importance increased in direct ratio. "Where did he escape from?" he declaimed in high sarcasm. "Why, I suppose you've heard of the mule now? And who would this infernal ragged piece be but his lordship's own court fool?" He jarred his captive with a massive shake. "Do you admit it, fool?" There was only white fear for answer, and the soundless sibilance of Beta's voice close to Torrin's ear. Torrin stepped forward to the guard in a friendly fashion. "Now, my man, suppose you take your hand away just for a while. This entertainer you hold has been dancing for us and has not yet danced out his fee." The guard shook the clown once again. "Return the man's fee, carrion." Torrin's hand moved quickly, and the guard's stun pistol was wrenched away with half a finger nearly following it. The guard howled his pain and rage. Torrin shoved him violently aside, and the clown, unhanded, scuttled behind him. Then there was a bustle, and a rough order was called out in the distance. A corridor formed itself, and 2 men strode through, electric whips in careless readiness. A dark giant in lieutenant's uniform followed them. The dark man spoke with a dangerous softness that meant he had little need of shouting to enforce his whims. He said, "Are you the man who notified us?" The guard was still holding his wrenched hand, and with a pain-distorted face mumbled, "I claim the reward, your mightiness. I accused that man." "You'll get your reward," said the lieutenant, without looking at him. He motioned curtly to his men. "Take him." Torrin felt the clown tearing at his robe with a maddened grip. He raised his voice and kept it from shaking. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant. This man is mine." "And who are you?" shouted the lieutenant. And the answer rang out, "A citizen of the Foundation." It worked, with the crowd at any rate. The pent-up silence broke into an intense hum. The mule's name might excite fear, but it was, after all, a new name, and scarcely struck as deeply in the vitals as the old one of the Foundation, that had destroyed the Empire, and the fear of which ruled a quadrant of the galaxy with ruthless despotism. The lieutenant kept pace. He said, "Are you aware of the identity of the man behind you?" "He is a friend of mine." "You'll need firm proof of his identity to take him," Torrin responded. "You realize that your actions are illegal?" I can have you shot. Undoubtedly. But then you would have shot a Foundation citizen, and it is quite likely that your body would be sent to the Foundation quartered as part compensation. It's been done by other warlords. The lieutenant wet his lips. The statement was true. "Disperse the crowd," he said to his men with suppressed ferocity. The electric whips rose and fell. There were shrieks and a vast surge of separation and flight. Torin and Beta felt only the most precarious security within the steel walls of their vessel, the Beta. The mule's clown, who had reported that within his narrow compass of body he held the lordly name of Magnifico Giganticus, sat hunched over the table and gobbled at the food set before him. His sad brown eyes lifted from his meal only to follow Beta's movements in the kitchen where he ate. Torin entered from the pilot room. "Bay, I was so scared. I don't know why I did it. I hope the mule is capable of understanding that a Foundation ship is Foundation territory." The inner buzzer sounded with its intermittent burring noise. Beta's lips moved wordlessly. A mule. Magnifico was in the doorway, eyes wide, his voice a whimper. "The mule?" Torin murmured. "I've got to let them in." A contact opened the airlock, and the outer door closed behind the newcomer. The scanner showed only a single shadowed figure. "It's only one person," said Torin, with open relief, and his voice was almost shaky as he bent toward the signal tube. "Who are you?" "You'd better let me in and find out, hadn't you?" The words came thinly out the receiver. "I'll inform you that this is a Foundation ship, and consequently Foundation territory by international treaty." "I know that." Torin opened the inner door and closed contact on his blast pistol, thumb hovering over the pressure point. There was the sound of footsteps, and then the door swung open, and Magnifico cried out, "It's not the mule, it's but a man." The man bowed to the clown somberly. "Very accurate. I'm not the mule." He held his hands apart. "I'm not armed, and I come on a peaceful errand. You might relax and put the blast pistol away. Your hand isn't steady enough for my peace of mind." Torin put his gun on the chair beside him. "Suppose you explain all this now." The stranger remained standing. He said, "News travels quickly, especially when it is apparently beyond belief. I don't suppose there's a person on Calgon who doesn't know that the mule's men were kicked in the teeth today by 2 tourists from the Foundation." He turned to Beta suddenly. "You're from the Foundation by birth, aren't you?" "Am I?" Beta said. "You're a member of the Democratic Opposition. They call it the Underground. I don't remember your name, but I do the face. You got out only recently, and wouldn't have if you were more important." Beta shrugged. "You know a lot." "I merely want a thorough mutual understanding." The man from the Foundation said quietly, "I'm Captain Han Pritcher of Information." "May I sit down?" "Thanks." Captain Pritcher swung a long leg across his knee and let an arm swing loose over the back of the chair. "I'll start out by saying that I don't know what all this is about from your angle. You, Torin, aren't from the Foundation, but it's not a hard guess that you're from one of the independent trading worlds. That doesn't bother me overmuch. But out of curiosity, what do you two want with this fellow, this clown you snatched to safety? You're risking your life to hold on to him." "We can't tell you that," Torin said. If you're waiting for the mule himself to come, announced by a fanfare of horns, drums, and electric organs, relax. Mule doesn't work that way. The man makes no personal appearances, and does not allow himself to be photographed or simulated, and is seen only by his most intimate associates." "Is that supposed to explain your interest in us, Captain?" questioned Torin. "No. The clown is the key. The clown is one of the very few that have seen him. I want him. He may be the proof I need, and I need something, Galaxy knows, to awaken the Foundation." "It needs awakening," broke in Beta with sudden sharpness. "Against what?" The captain's voice was grave and intense. "The mule is not a human being." And his two listeners drew back in horror at the implications. The captain continued, He is a mutant, and as his subsequent career makes obvious, a highly successful one. I don't know his powers, or the exact extent to which he is what our thrillers would call a Superman, but the rise from nothing to the conqueror of Calgan's warlord in 2 years is revealing. You see, don't you, the danger? Now, let me speak to the clown. The captain faced the trembling Magnifico, who obviously distrusted this huge, hard man who faced him. The captain began slowly. Have you seen the mule with your own eyes? I have but too well, respected sir, and felt the weight of his arm with my own body as well. Can you describe him? It is frightening to recall him, respected sir. He is a man of mighty frame, his hair is of a burning crimson. He is a man of overpowering might, respected sir, and cruel in the use of his power, and his eyes, respected sir, no one sees. What? He wears spectacles of a curious nature. It is said that they are opaque, and that he sees by a powerful magic that far transcends human powers. I have heard, and his voice was small and mysterious, that to see his eyes is to see death, that he kills with his eyes. Magnifico's eyes wheeled quickly from one watching face to another. He quavered, It is true. As I live, it is true. I think we should leave, said the captain, right now. The mule may not wish to antagonize the Foundation, but he runs a frightful risk in letting Magnifico get away. It probably accounts for the hue and cry after the poor devil in the first place. Yes, said Beta coldly. And when we are back on the Foundation, what then, Captain? Why, you are then cooperative citizens of Calgan, are you not? I know nothing to the contrary, do I? Nothing was said. Torrin turned to the controls. There was an imperceptible lurch. It was when Torrin had left Calgan sufficiently far in the rear that Captain Pritchard's face first creased slightly, for no ship of the mule had in any way attempted to bar their leaving. Looks like he's letting us carry off Magnifico, said Torrin. Not so good for your story. Unless, corrected the captain, he wants us to carry him off, in which case it's not so good for the Foundation, if he uses this as an excuse for action. Ebling Miz was the freest form of life in the pure science of the Foundation. In a world where science was respected, he was the scientist, with capital letters. He was needed, and he knew it. When Ebling Miz decided to allow Mayor Imber to honor him with an audience, he did not wait for the usual rigid line of command to pass his request up and the favored reply down. But he barged past the two ineffectually bleating guards and into the mayor's palace. Imber inevitably said, What is the meaning of this? I'll leave just as soon as I deliver what I came to deliver. Galaxy, if it didn't involve a Selden crisis, I would leave right now. Selden crisis? Imber exhibited his first interest. Miz was a great psychologist, a Democrat, boor, and rebel, certainly, but a psychologist, too. Ebling Miz said unhurriedly, You know what I'm doing these days? I have your reports here, replied the mayor with satisfaction. As I understand it, your investigations into the mathematics of psychohistory have been intended to duplicate Harry Selden's work and eventually trace the projected course of future history for the use of the Foundation. Exactly, said Miz dryly. When Selden first established the Foundation, he was wise enough to include no psychologists among the scientists placed here, so that the Foundation has always worked blindly along the course of historical necessity. I am aware of that, Miz. It is a waste of time to repeat it. I'm not repeating, blared Miz, because what I'm going to tell you isn't in any of those reports. Let me tell you about the Time Vault. The time vault is what Harry Selden placed here at the beginning to help us over the rough spots. Selden prepared holograms of himself that would appear in the time vault at times of crisis in order to help and explain. 4 crises so far, 4 appearances. What I have done involves the determination to a pretty fair degree of certainty of the exact date of the next appearance of Harry Selden. I can give you the exact day, in other words, that the coming Selden crisis, the 5th, will reach its climax. How far off? Demanded Inver tensely. 4 months. You understand what that means? For a crisis to come to a head in 4 months would mean that it has been preparing for years. I tell you, miss, there is not a thing in my weekly reports that breathes anything but order and peace. The door at the far end of the room opened, and a secretary stepped in and addressed the floor. Excellence, Captain Han Pritchard of Information, returning from Calgan in disobedience of your orders, has, according to prior instructions, been imprisoned and awaits execution. Those accompanying him are being held for questioning. He has reported vaguely dangerous designs on the part of the new warlord of Calgan. His remarks have been recorded and a full report filed. Inver had a curiously swirling sensation of unreality. A full report has been received. Well, he said anxiously, his world crumbling. Excellence, reports have within the quarter hour been received from the Selenian frontier. Ships identified as Calganian have been entering Foundation territory unauthorized. The ships are armed. Fighting has occurred. Liz turned to the mayor. Hadn't you better get the machinery moving, Inver? 4 months, you know. Inver sat stonily, glaze-eyed. Only one finger seemed alive, and it traced rapid, jerky triangles on the smooth desktop before him. When the 27 independent trading worlds, united only by their distrust of the mother planet of the Foundation, agreed to meet and set about negotiating for the world that would be their meeting place, the devious routes of diplomacy led to the world of Radol. On the 5th day of the convention, Randu, brother of Fran and uncle of Torin, entered the central hall and found the 2 men he had asked to be there waiting for him. They were alone in the empty hall. Randu said quickly before he sat down, "We 3 represent about half the military potential of the independent trading world." "Yes," said Mangan of Is. "My colleague and I have already commented upon the fact." "I am ready," said Randu, "to speak quickly and earnestly. I am not interested in bargaining or subtlety. Our position has radically worsened." "As a result of," urged Oval Gree of Nemon, "of developments of the last hour. First, our position is not of our doing, and only doubtfully in our control. Our original dealings were not with the mule, but with several others, notably the ex-warlord of Calgan, whom the mule defeated at a most inconvenient time for us." "Yes, but this mule is a worthy substitute," said Mangan. "I do not cavil at details." "You may when you know all the details," Randu said. "A month ago I sent my nephew and my nephew's wife to Calgan. My motives were, I must admit, rather obscure. Mainly I was curious about the mule." Oval commented, "You must have been surprised at the outcome, then, since there's not a trading world, I believe, that does not know that this nephew of yours abducted a mule underling in the name of the Foundation. I find it hard to believe you had no hand in that. Come, it was a skillful job." Randu shook his white head. "Not of my doing, nor willfully of my nephew's, who is now held prisoner at the Foundation and may not live to see the completion of this so skillful job. I have just heard from him. His message capsule has been smuggled out somehow, come through the war zone, gone to Haven, and traveled from there to here. It has been a month on its travels." "And?" Randu leaned a heavy hand upon his knee and said sadly,
I'm afraid we are cast for the same role that the one-time warlord of Calgan played. My nephew says the mule is a mutant.
What kind of mutant?
Randu forced the rising impatience down. What kind of mutant would start as an unknown, assemble an army, capture a planet, then a system, then a region, and then attack the Foundation and defeat them at the planet Horligar? Ovalgree shrugged.
So you think you'll beat the Foundation?
I don't know. Suppose he does.
Sorry, I can't go that far. You don't beat the Foundation. Look, we have nothing to go on except for the statements of an inexperienced boy. Suppose we shelve it for a while. With all the mule's victories, we weren't worried until now. And unless he goes a good deal further than he has, I see no reason to change that. Yes?
Randu frowned and despaired at the cobweb texture of his argument. He said to both, "Gentlemen, we have nearly 1,000 ships waiting to be thrown into the fight at the proper moment to seize control of the Foundation. I say we should change that. I say throw those 1,000 ships onto the board now against the mule." "You mean for the tyrant Ember and the bloodsuckers of the Foundation?" demanded Mangan with quiet venom. Randu raised a weary hand. "Spare me the invective. Against the mule, I say, and for I don't care who."
Ovalgree rose. "Randu, I'll have nothing to do with that. You present it to the full council tonight if you particularly hunger for political suicide."
He left without another word, and Mangan followed silently, leaving Randu to drag out a lonely hour of endless, insoluble consideration. At the full council that night, he said nothing. Ovalgree pushed into Randu's room the next morning and said boldly, harshly, "My home, Neman, has been bombarded from space by treacherous attack." Randu's eyes narrowed. "The Foundation?" "The mule," exploded Gree. "The mule." His words raced. "The attack was unprovoked and deliberate. Most of our fleet had joined the international flotilla. The few left as home squadron were insufficient, were blown out of the sky. There have been no landings yet, and there may not be, for half the attackers are reported destroyed. But it is war, and I have come to ask how Haven stands on the matter." "Haven, I am sure, will adhere to the spirit of the Charter of Federation. In attacking Neman, he attacks us as well." "This mule is a madman. Can he defeat the universe?" Ovalgree faltered, sat down, and seized Randu's wrist. "Our few survivors have reported the mule's possession of a new weapon, a nuclear field depressor." "A what?" Gree said. "Most of our ships were lost because their nuclear weapons failed them. It could not have happened by either accident or sabotage. It must have been a weapon of the mule. It didn't work perfectly. The effect was intermittent. There were ways to neutralize. My dispatches are not detailed. But you see that such a tool would change the nature of war and possibly make our entire fleet obsolete." Randu felt an old man. His face sagged hopelessly. "I am afraid a monster is grown that will devour all of us. Yet we must fight him." Except for the first few days, Beta's imprisonment had been a light burden, far lighter, it seemed, than this half-hour wait in the home of Ebling Miz, who had expressed his intention as official psychologist of the Foundation to interview the mule's clown. Perhaps Beta might have grown weary of the strain had not Magnifico's long nose drooped in a gesture that plainly showed his own far greater tension. "There's no need for worry, Magnifico. I'm with you, and I won't let anyone hurt you." Ebling Miz entered, carrying a carefully wrapped bundle, and approached to shake Beta's hand with careless pressure. Beta vigorously returned his handshake. Miz turned to Magnifico. He unwrapped the package. Know what this is, boy? Magnifico hurled himself out of his seat and grabbed the multi-keyed musical instrument. He croaked, "A busy sonar, and of a make to distill joy out of a dead man's heart." His long fingers caressed the instrument softly and slowly, pressing lightly on contacts with a rippling motion, resting momentarily on one key, then another, and in the air before them a soft, glowing rosiness appeared. Ebling Miz said, "All right, boy, you said you could pound on one of those gadgets, and here's your chance. You'd better tune it, though. It's out of a museum." With Magnifico thus preoccupied, Miz took Beta to one side and said quietly, "Clown won't talk without you. Will you help?" She nodded. "Good," he said. "His state of fear is almost fixed, and I doubt that his mental strength would stand a psychic probe. If I'm to get anything out of him otherwise, he's got to feel absolutely at ease. You understand?" She nodded again. "This visi-sonar is the first step in the process. He's ready." In the darkness, a little globe of pulsing color grew in rhythmic spurts and burst in midair into formless gouts that swirled high and came down as curving streamers in interlacing patterns. They coalesced into little spheres, no two alike in color, and Beta began discovering things. She noticed that closing her eyes made the color pattern all the clearer. The music crashed in 20 cymbals, and before her she saw a palace and a garden and tiny men and women on a bridge stretching out as far as she could see, swimming through the stately swells of stringed music converging in upon her. And then there seemed a frightened pause, a hesitant, indrawn motion, a swift collapse. The colors fled, spun into a globe that shrank and rose and disappeared. Beta blinked until the tears came, as though for the longing of what was gone. Ebling Miz was a podgy inertness, with his eyes still round and his mouth open. Only Magnifico himself was alive, and he fondled his visi-sonar in a crooning ecstasy. "My lady," he gasped, "how liked you my composition?" "Was it yours?" breathed Beta. At her awe, his thin face turned a glowing red to the tip of his mighty nose. "My very own, my lady. The mule liked it not, but often and often I have played it for my own amusement." Now, through the midst of the chatter, Miz shook himself to active life. "Magnifico!" cried Miz. "Would you like to perform for thousands in the great halls of the Foundation? Would you like to be your own master, honored by all, wealthy, and all that? The world is yours if you would play so for the mayor and his trading trusts. Wouldn't you like that?" The clown glanced briefly at Beta. "Would she stay with me?" Beta laughed. "Of course, silly." "It would all be yours," Magnifico replied earnestly, "and surely the wealth of the galaxy itself would be yours before I could repay my debt to your kindness." "But," said Miz casually, "if you would first help me. A little surface probe that doesn't hurt." There was a flare of deadly fear in Magnifico's eyes. "Not a probe. I have seen it used. This probe I have is a surface probe that wouldn't hurt a baby." "That's right," Magnifico urged Beta. "It's only to help beat the mule and keep him far away. Once that's done, you and I will be rich and famous all our lives." Magnifico held out a trembling hand. "Will you hold my hand, then?" Beta took it in both her own, and the clown watched the approach of the burnished terminal plates of the probe with large eyes. Ebling Miz rested carelessly on the too lavish chair in Mayor Inber's private quarters. Inber said peevishly, What of the mule? Tell me that. What of the mule?
The mule? Well, I'll tell you. I used a surface probe on the clown and got little. I've been working mathematically, Ms. replied. In about a month, I should say, I may have something more for you. But what of it? If this is all outside Selden's plans, our chances are precious little.
Inver swore at him. The Foundation will win. The Foundation must win.
Despite the loss at Holiger.
It was not a loss. We retreat, as the Foundation has always retreated under attack, until the inevitable march of history turns with us. Already I see the outcome. 2 days ago, the so-called Association of Independent Traders declared war on the mule, and the Foundation fleet is strengthened at a stroke by 1,000 ships. He must lose. It is inevitable, as always.
Ms. still exuded skepticism. Then you tell me that Selden planned even for the fortuitous occurrence of a mutant.
A mutant? I can't tell him from a human, nor could you, but for the ravings of a rebel captain, some outland youngsters, and an addled juggler and clown. You forget the most conclusive evidence of all, your own.
My own?
Just for a moment, Ms. was startled. Your own, sneered the mayor. The time vault opens in 9 weeks. What of that? It opens for a crisis. If this attack of the mule is not the crisis, where is the real one? The one the vault is opening for.
4 times in 3 centuries, the simulacrum of the living Harry Selden himself had sat in a glass cubicle in the time vault and spoken. Twice he had spoken without an audience. Through 3 centuries and 9 generations, the old man who had seen the great days of universal empire projected himself, and still he understood more of the galaxy than his great ultra-great grandchildren. The empty cubicle waited patiently. The first to arrive was Mayor Inver, then the select group of the great props of the mayoralty. The leaders of the great trading organizations appeared in 1s and 2s with a degree of pomp appropriate to their financial status and place in mayoral favor. Somewhere incongruous among the stilted ceremony of all this, Randu of Haven made his appearance. Beta and Torin had already arrived. They rose in their back seats and beckoned to Randu as he passed. Randu smiled gently.
You are here, after all. How did you work it?
Magnifico was our politician, grinned Torin. Magnifico refused to attend without us. What's wrong, Uncle? You don't look well.
Randu nodded. We're in for bad times, Torin. When the mule is disposed of, our turn will come, I'm afraid.
Magnifico was the picture of misery and heart-sick depression. He clutched at Beta's hand, and when she bent down, he whispered,
Do you suppose, my lady, that all these great ones were in the audience, perhaps, when I played the Visisonar?
Everyone, I'm sure, Beta assured him, and shook him gently, and I'm sure they all think that your concert was the greatest ever seen. It was noon, and the glass cubicle was no longer empty. It was doubtful that anyone had witnessed the appearance. It was a clean break. One moment he was not there, and the next moment he was there. In the cubicle was a figure in a wheelchair, old and shrunken, from whose wrinkled face bright eyes shone, and whose voice, as it turned out, was the most alive thing about him. I am Harry Selden. I do not know if anyone is here at all by mere sense perception, but that is unimportant. I have few fears as yet of a breakdown in the plan. Let us take up the problem of the moment. For the first time, the Foundation has been faced, or perhaps is in the last stages of facing, civil war. Till now, the attacks from without have been adequately beaten off, and inevitably so, according to the strict laws of psychohistory. The attack at present
is that of a too undisciplined outer group of the Foundation against the too authoritarian central government. The procedure was necessary, the result obvious. The dignity of the high-born audience was beginning to break. Inber was half out of his chair. Beta leaned forward with troubled eyes. What was the great Selden talking about? She had missed a few of the words. That the compromise worked out is necessary in two respects. The revolt of the independent traders introduces an element of new uncertainty in a government perhaps grown overconfident. The element of striving is restored. Although beaten, a healthy increase of democracy. There were raised voices now. Whispers had ascended the scale of loudness, and the edge of panic was in them. Beta said in Torin's ear, "Why doesn't he talk about the mule? The traders never revolted." Torin shrugged his shoulders. A new and firmer coalition government was the necessary and beneficial outcome of the logical civil war forced upon the Foundation. And now only the remnants of the old empire stand in the way of further expansion, and in them, for the next few years at any rate, there is no problem. Of course, I cannot reveal the nature of the next problem. In the complete uproar, Selden's lips moved soundlessly. Ebling Miz was next to Randu, face ruddy. He was shouting, "Selden is off his rocker! He's got the wrong crisis! Were your traders ever planning civil war?" Randu said thinly, "We planned one, yes. We called it off in the face of the mule." "Then the mule is an added feature, unprepared for in Selden's psychohistory." "What's happened?" Miz cried. In the sudden, frozen silence, the cubicle was once again empty. The nuclear glow of the walls was extinguished, the soft current of conditioned air absent. Somewhere, the sound of a shrill siren was rising and falling in the scale, and Randu formed the words with his lips, "Space raid." "Something has stopped all nuclear power in the time vault, and the mule is attacking," screamed Miz. Inber's wail rose high above the noise. "Take your seats. The mule is 50 parsecs distant." "He was," shouted back Miz, "a week ago. Right now, Terminus is being bombarded." Beta felt a deep depression settle softly upon her. She felt its folds tighten close and thick. The outer noise of a gathering crowd was evident. The doors were thrown open, and a harried figure entered, and spoke rapidly to Inber, who had rushed to him. "Excellence," he whispered, "not a vehicle is running in the city. Not a communication line to the outside is open. The 10th Fleet is reported defeated, and the mule ships are outside the atmosphere. The General Staff—" Inber crumbled, and was a collapsed figure of impotence upon the floor. In all the hall not a voice was raised now. Even the growing crowd without was fearful and silent, and the horror of cold panic hovered dangerously. Inber was lifted. Wine was held to his lips. His lips moved before his eyes opened, and the word they formed was surrender. Beta found herself near to crying, not for sorrow or humiliation, but simply and plainly out of a vast, frightened despair. Ebling Miz plucked at her sleeve. "Come, young lady." She was pulled out of her chair bodily. "We're leaving," he said, "and take your musician with you." "Magnifico," said Beta faintly. The clown shrank in horror. His eyes were glassy. "The mule!" Magnifico shrieked. "The mule is coming for me!" He thrashed wildly at her touch. Torin leaned over and brought his fist up sharply. Magnifico slumped into unconsciousness, and Torin carried him out, potato sack fashion. The next day, the ugly, battle-black ships of the mule poured down upon the landing fields of the planet Terminus. The proclamation of occupation was made 24 hours to the minute after Selden had appeared before the former mighty of the Foundation. Of all the Foundation planets, Only the independent traders still stood, and against them the power of the mule, conqueror of the Foundation, now turned itself. Randu, as newly appointed coordinator of the Confederation of Cities on Haven, had been assigned at his own request to an upper room, from the window of which he could brood over the rooftops and greenery of Haven. "Do you feel it too, then?" he asked Ebling Miz. "This miserable sense of defeat." Miz nodded slowly. "I do. It's a mass psychosis. Galaxy, Randu. What do you expect? Here you have a whole culture brought up to a blind, blubbering belief that a folk hero of the past has everything all planned out and is taking care of every little piece of their unprintable lives." "And you see a way out?" Randu asked. "No, but there must be one. Maybe Selden made no provisions for the mule. Maybe he didn't guarantee our victory. But then neither did he guarantee defeat. He's just out of the game, and we're on our own. The mule can be licked." "How?" "He undoubtedly has his shortcomings, which we must locate. He would not be so secretive, so shy of others' eyes, if these shortcomings were not apparent and fatal." Randu seemed immersed in a near wordless gloom. He said, "What of your own researches on the mule's clown?" Ebling Miz hesitated. "Useless as yet. If my mathematical tools were up to it, then from the clown alone I could analyze the mule completely. Then we would have him. We could solve the queer anomalies that have impressed me already." "Such as?" "Think, man. The mule defeated the navies of the Foundation at will, but he has not once managed to force the much weaker fleets of the independent traders to retreat in open combat. The Foundation fell at a blow. The independent traders hold out against all his strength. He first used the nuclear field oppressor upon the nuclear weapons of the independent traders of Nemon. The element of surprise lost them that battle, but they countered the field. He was never able to use it successfully against the independents again, but over and over again it worked against Foundation forces. It worked on the Foundation itself. Why? It is all illogical. So there must be factors of which we are not aware." Randu stared unseeingly out the window. "But we're certain to lose now. If the mule had 1,000 weaknesses," he said. "If he were a network of holes." He did not turn. "The Foundation underground, upon which most people here seem to rely so heavily, has thus far done nothing of consequence. The mule has been politic enough to promise to safeguard the property and profits of the great traders, and they have gone over to him. It's apparently an insurmountable temptation to give up an endangered political power if that will maintain your hold over economic affairs." "You don't think Haven can fight the mule?" "I don't think Haven will." And now Randu turned his troubled face full upon Miz. "We escaped easily after the Time Vault episode, Evelyn. Others had the opportunity to escape as well. A few did. Most did not. The nuclear field oppressor could have been counteracted. All it required was a certain amount of ingenuity and labor. I think Haven, too, will surrender. This is what I called you here to tell you. I want you to leave Haven. You're our only chance of defeating the mule. You can't do that here. You'll have to go to what's left of the Empire." "To Trontor?" "That's right. What was once the Empire is bare bones today. But something must still be at the center. They've got the records there at the University Library. I hear it is deserted, but intact. And you may learn more of mathematical psychology, perhaps enough to be able to interpret the clown's mind. He will go with you, of course." Miz responded dryly. "I doubt if he'd be willing to, even for fear of the mule, unless your niece went with him." "I know that. Toran and Beta are leaving with you for that very reason, and Ebling has another, greater purpose. Harry Seldon founded 2 foundations 3 centuries ago, one at each end of the galaxy. You must find that second foundation. With cold-eyed calm, Toran drove his protesting ship, the Beta, from the vicinity of one star to that of another. If the neighborhood of a great mass made an interstellar jump erratic and difficult, it also made the enemy detection devices useless, or nearly so. Ebling Miz called out to the pilot room. Toran rose from his charts. "What's the matter?" Toran stepped down into the small central chamber. Miz shook his head. "Scuppered if I know. The Mule's newsmen are announcing a special bulletin. Thought you might want to get in on it." The monotonous propaganda routine of the Mule's special bulletins never varied. First, the martial music, then the buttery slickness of the announcer. The minor news items would come, following one another in patient lockstep, then the pause, then the trumpets, and the rising excitement, and the climax. The voice that came at last was solemn, slow, hard. "By order of our sovereign, it is announced that the planet Haven, hitherto in warlike opposition to his will, has submitted to the acceptance of defeat. At this moment the forces of our sovereign are occupying the planet. Opposition was scattered, uncoordinated, and speedily crushed." Toran rose and walked unsteadily away, without a word. Miz made no move to stop him. When Beta stepped out of the kitchen, Miz motioned silence. He said, "They've taken Haven, without a fight." He stopped and swallowed. "You'd better leave Toran alone. It's not pleasant for him. Suppose we eat without him this once." Beta looked once toward the pilot room, then turned hopelessly. "The Foundation, then Haven," she whispered. "Disaster seems to follow us without touching. We always seem to get out by a hair. Will it last forever?" Ebling Miz was not listening. He had come to a realization. "Beta, you remember the news item that the Mule's clown was not found on Terminus, that it was suspected he had fled to Haven or been carried there by his original kidnappers? There is an importance attached to him, Beta, that hasn't diminished, and we still don't know why he's so important. Magnifico must know something that is fatal to the Mule. I'm sure of it."